Hello everyone, my name's Maren Smith, and it's going to be nice and windy, so I'm going to readjust things and take my mask off. Much better. Hi everyone, my name's Maren Smith. I'm the Executive Director of Clean Energy Canada, which is a think tank based at Simon Fraser University that works on energy transition. And I'm very happy to welcome you today to the traditional lands of the Esquimalt and the Songhees people. So I'm wondering, how many here know that over 5% of all new car sales in Canada were electric? But in BC, that number is over 13%. And so when friends come from out east, it's something they really notice. Electric vehicles are everywhere in the Lower Mainland, here on Vancouver Island. But if you're in Toronto, Hamilton, Calgary, Regina, not so much. And the reason is really simple. In some provinces, governments took action to make that happen. And a few years ago, this federal government really stepped up to change that. First, with purchase incentives for electric vehicles, then investments in charging infrastructure, and now the introduction of a policy, a nationwide zero-emission vehicle supply mandate. They're making it easier for Canadians to get into the driver's seats of an EV, no matter where you live in this big country of ours. 80% of Canadians now say that they're open to getting an EV, and in another recent poll, just over half of Canadians said that they'll never buy a gas vehicle again. It's no wonder. Clean Energy Canada put out a report last week that recently compared the costs of owning an EV versus a gas car, and in most cases it wasn't even close. Despite the high sticker price of an EV, the fuel and the maintenance savings are so significant that the EV version often comes out tens of thousands of dollars cheaper. And that's the future, the only future for our auto sector, for auto jobs. So recent investments like the Stellantis battery plant in Windsor will create 2,500 jobs and produce enough batteries to power about 500,000 EVs every year. And jobs are just one bottom line, and here's another. The transportation sector represents a quarter of climate change causing pollution in this country. Electric vehicles, they're not just a good climate solution, they're an absolutely necessary one. We can't hit our climate targets without them. As an EV driver myself, I can tell you that the benefits are many. The smooth, quiet ride, the money I'm saving, the fact that I haven't done an oil change in years, and I don't have to get stressed out when I drive by those gas stations and see the shock of the price of gas this week. Those are all real bonuses about this climate solution. And we're fortunate in Canada to have leadership that understands this. Not just with the urgency of acting on climate now, but the link between climate action, affordability, and economic security. And so it's with great pleasure that I introduce the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau.
Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you, Maren, for those kind words and for your leadership over so many years on clean solutions. It's always great to be back here on Vancouver Island, particularly on such a gorgeous day. Reminds me of trips I made out here with my mum when I was really young, trips to visit my family in Brentwood Bay more recently, and trips out here with my own kids. This is a beautiful part of the country, and it's a great place to ground ourselves in the kind of future we're trying to build. I want to begin by acknowledging that we're gathering on the traditional territory of the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. I'm here today with Laurie and David, who, like all parents, are thinking about their daughter Alexandria's future. We are, too. Il y a quelques semaines, à Vancouver, on a présenté notre plan de réduction des émissions pour de l'air pur et une économie forte. La semaine passée, on a continué d'aller de l'avant avec le budget 2022. We know we need to cut emissions. We know we need to reduce pollution. But one of the best ways of doing that is to get more clean cars on the road. As Laurie and David were telling me, their EV works great and is much cheaper to power than their gas car. Too often, though, electric vehicles aren't in reach. So we're making smart, targeted investments to change that. First of all, we're making EVs easier to buy. We're extending the program of up to $5,000 to help people buy electric vehicles. We're bringing in new mandatory sales targets of 20% by 2026, 60% by 2030, on the way to 100% by 2035. We're also going to make EVs easier to charge. We're building a national network of chargers on top of the thousands already installed or under construction. En plus, pour créer des bons emplois, on fait du Canada un leader en fabrication de véhicules électriques, on investit dans l'industrie automobile de l'avenir, on met en œuvre la première stratégie sur les minéraux critiques pour bâtir les emplois et une économie plus forte. On fait ça pour réduire la pollution, réduire les factures pour les familles et pour rendre notre économie encore plus forte. Tout ça, c'est seulement un exemple concret comment notre plan peut favoriser l'environnement, l'économie et les familles. With this budget, with everything we've been working on, we're moving forward on everything from a new tax credit for clean tech to protecting old-growth forests to retrofits for people's homes. This budget and the emissions reduction plan of the week before is about real results for people like Laurie and David, and especially Alexandria. Whether it's climate action or making housing more affordable, we're investing in Canadians and in our future. Happy to take your questions now.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And I'll start the period question for 20 minutes. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Mary Brooke with Island Social Trends. Hi. The Canada Health Transfer was not a specific line item in the budget last week. And Deputy Minister Freeland said on the weekend that there was more of a plan and clarity sought for in those negotiations. So I'm just wondering what the federal government might have in mind in that context. Does it have to do with facilities, doctor billing rates, training for more personnel? And do you see a national vision for that?
Absolutely. There is no question, particularly coming through the 2 years of this pandemic, we need more investments in healthcare. We need to make sure that Canadians from coast to coast to coast are getting the absolute best quality healthcare possible. During the pandemic, the federal government stepped up with close to $69 billion new spending on healthcare related, much of it transfers to the provinces, to be able to get through this health crisis that was the pandemic. But we know that there is a need for more long-term structural spending to go at some of the deep challenges faced by Canadians across the country in accessing top-quality health care. That's why we're engaged in conversations with the Council of the Federation, specifically with Premier Horgan, to try and talk about how we can really make sure that money invested in health care from the federal government, because we are very clear there will be significantly more money from the federal government into healthcare. But we've seen in the past, in decades past, that just more money into healthcare, even from the federal government, doesn't necessarily lead to the right outcomes or better outcomes for Canadians. So this time, we're sitting down carefully to talk about how to make sure that new investments in healthcare will deliver the results Canadians need, from better access to family doctors and nurses to primary care, more investments in the kinds of, well, we just did $2 billion a few weeks ago to help provinces lift some of the backlogs in surgeries that accumulated over COVID. So we're working hand in hand. There will be more money for healthcare. We just need to, all of us, work together to make sure that it actually delivers results for Canadians. Oui. Nous savons que nous avons besoin de plus d'investissements en santé à travers le pays. Pendant la pandémie, on a investi presque 69 milliards de dollars de plus dans nos systèmes de santé, dans des mesures pour protéger les Canadiens de la pandémie. Et il y a quelques semaines, on a transféré 2 milliards de dollars aux provinces pour aider avec les délais et les procédures qui ont été reportées à cause de la pandémie. C'est des priorités sur lesquelles on est en train de miser. On est actuellement en conversation avec le Conseil de la Fédération, particulièrement le Premier ministre Horgan ici en Colombie-Britannique, pour s'assurer que les investissements que le gouvernement fédéral va faire en santé livrent concrètement des améliorations pour les familles, que ce soit plus de médecins, que ce soit de l'aide en santé mentale. les gens veulent des résultats concrets et on va s'assurer de pouvoir livrer ça pour les Canadiens.
Next question.
Hi, Cindy Harnett at the Times Colonist. There's an expectation that there'll be protesters this afternoon at City Hall. The mask mandates and vaccine mandates are essentially over, and yet there remains this cultural divide, if you'll call it. What would you say to those protesters today?
First of all, I don't know if this is a good thing, but I can't remember a trip to Victoria City Hall in which there weren't a few people expressing their concerns about some issue or other. And it's really important that Canadians continue to be able to come out and express their views, express their disagreement with government. Protests should always be legal. They should be legal in a safe and responsible way, and that's exactly what we're going to continue to encourage. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's on people's minds as I go to meet with the mayor and see people at City Hall. At the same time, I think it's important to understand that we've been through a couple of really difficult years, and it has led to anxiety, it's led to a sense of helplessness, a sense of frustration around governments having imposed mandates to keep us all safe. These are things that people are obviously going to be expressing, and I think it's important to acknowledge that, even as we continue to remain committed to following the best science possible to keep everyone safe. And I know that's what governments of all orders across the country are looking at, how to move forward in a way that keeps people safe but gets us back as quickly as possible to the things we love to do. We know that the possible sixth wave we're on the verge of, that's hitting in some parts of the country already with this new variant of Omicron, is going to be another challenge for us to go through, challenge for our frontline health workers to go through. We need to make sure we're there to support them at the same time as we try and allow Canadians to get back to the things they love.
Next question.
Good morning. Prime Minister Rob Buffin with CTV News. When you were here in 2019 in advance of that federal election, you held a press conference like this at a construction site, and you were touting affordable housing and the need to address that issue. In the years since, you know as well as anyone, the cost of houses has skyrocketed. Your budget addresses affordable housing, but critics have said measures like banning foreigners from buying real estate will make a very small dent, if any. Only less than 2% of houses in BC are owned by foreigners. What do you say to critics who say you're not doing enough to address the supply issue when it comes to affordable housing?
Well, I think, first of all, Canadians right across the country, but particularly here in BC, know that the housing crisis is real. The fact that families, particularly young families, are working harder and harder, and instead of getting closer to that moment where they can buy their new home, or their first home, they feel like they're getting further away from it, or it's receding further and further from them. That's not right. But what Canadians also know is that anyone promising a simple, easy fix to the housing crisis is trying to push something politically that isn't true. This is a complex situation. It's going to require many, many different measures. And that's why what we've been doing since 2017 is moving forward on a national housing strategy with billions of dollars worth of investments that have helped millions of families get into new homes, that have helped reduce chronic homelessness, that have increased supply with a range of measures, including the Rapid Housing Initiative that has made a significant impact. But there is more to do, much more to do. And that's why in this budget we're focused on three things. First of all, helping Canadians save more with a tax-free savings account that allows them to be tax-free on the way in and tax-free on the way out, up to $40,000 towards the purchase of a new home. Other measures as well to help them save. Secondly, we're moving forward on increasing supply because we know one of the challenges we have is population growth in this country hasn't been matched by an equivalent growth in housing supply. So we are moving forward on a number of measures from the Rapid Housing Initiative to others, but specifically a partnership with municipalities to reduce the barriers that municipalities are seeing to creating new housing stock. It's billions of dollars. It'll go towards helping them shift zoning regulations, accelerate permitting, move forward on solutions around federal land that will allow for the creation of significantly more housing stock. And we're talking about doubling the new housing starts over the next 10 years in this country to really go at the challenge of supply. And the third element is stopping speculation. We know there are unfair practices from blind bidding to other issues that are really challenging fairness in the housing market, which is why we're moving forward on a homeowner's Bill of Rights. But we're also, as you said, cracking down with a total ban on foreign owners purchasing housing in Canada for the next couple of years. And this is because part of the pressures on our housing market has come from people looking at housing as an asset class, as a good investment vehicle. Housing should be about homes for families to be able to build a future for themselves and their kids. It should be about strengthening communities. It should be about creating an opportunity for people to grow their own financial stability. It shouldn't be about wealthy investors and corporations trying to secure solid investments for the future. These are all things we're working on. We have a lot in this housing plan, but that's why we know that we're going to see impacts in the coming months and years of this. Absolument. Nous savons que la crise du logement est sentie à travers le pays, particulièrement ici en Colombie-Britannique. C'est pour ça que nous nous concentrons sur une variété de mesures qui vont contrer ces défis. D'abord, au niveau de l'épargne, on va aider les familles à épargner plus pour pouvoir acheter leur première maison avec un compte de jusqu'à 40 000 $ non imposables. Et qui va aider avec d'autres mesures aussi sur l'épargne. Deuxièmement, on va travailler sur l'offre. On sait qu'il y a un des grands défis qu'on a au Canada, c'est que la population est en train d'augmenter plus rapidement que l'offre de logement est en train d'augmenter. Donc, on a un programme, dont un programme avec les municipalités pour accélérer le développement de nouveaux logements, que ce soit au niveau du zonage, des permis ou d'autres défis qu'ils ont en termes de bâtir du logement. On va être là pour les encourager, les inciter et être partenaire avec eux pour en créer. Finalement, on va mettre fin aux pratiques injuste et la spéculation qui est en train d'augmenter les prix du logement à travers le pays. Nous allons s'assurer que le logement n'est pas vu comme investissement, comme véhicule d'investissement pour des corporations et des investisseurs étrangers, mais comme opportunité pour créer un chez-soi abordable pour des familles qui veulent bâtir une communauté, un avenir fort pour leurs enfants.
Next question.
Prime Minister Richard Zussman from Global BC. SFU modelers found that BC would need to at least double or triple its electricity production in less than 3 decades to meet these electrification targets from both the federal government and from the province. This would be the equivalent of about 20 to 30 new Site C dams. How can the federal government help invest in these sorts of projects, or is nuclear power one of the options that will have to be looked at to meet these electrification goals?
Well, it's very clear, first of all, that we need to reduce our emissions and we need to reduce our dependence on oil and gas. If we didn't already know that, the conflict in Ukraine right now with Russia's illegal invasion is emphasizing just how much we need to be able to find cleaner sources of energy for our communities, for our country. We've already done, particularly here in BC, a lot of work on electrification, but there is much more work to do. As we get off oil and gas, we're going to need more electricity, and I know there are a lot of brilliant innovators here in BC and across the country leaning in on that. As a federal government, our role is to be there as a partner for provinces, for municipalities, for projects that are trying to develop the kinds of solutions that won't just be needed here in BC, won't just be needed across the country, but will be needed around the world. If we as a world are going to reach those targets of keeping global warming to under 1.5 degrees, these solutions we develop in Canada will be an essential part of how we move forward. And that's why we're there to invest in a range of pathways so that we can make sure we're not just protecting the planet, but we're creating a strong and growing economy for years to come.
But nuclear on the table?
Nuclear is on the table, absolutely.
Next question.
Hi, Prime Minister. Jake Romp of Victoria News. Even with these federal rebates continued, electric vehicles, the upfront cost of them remains far too much for many young people like myself. I guess what is the federal government going to do in future budgets to make the transition more affordable for people who want to be a part of a low carbon economy?
Great question. This is a comprehensive plan we're putting forward that has a number of different elements in it. First of all, the affordability and the affordability challenge. We know that electric vehicles are more expensive up front. Even if over the long term they turn out to be cheaper, we know people need that help up front, which is why that rebate that we put forward of up to $5,000 that we're expanding to cover more models and more types of vehicles will be helpful. But more than that, we have to increase the supply as well, which is why modeling on BC's very successful mandate, we're moving forward with specific targets of 20% electric vehicles for all new sales in 2026. 60% by 2030 and 100% by 2035. And with the kind of demand and the kind of solutions being brought forward by the auto industry, it wouldn't surprise me for us to reach some of those targets ahead of time because there is such a demand and such an interest in doing it, and we will see prices come down with those. On top of that, as we create programs for more heavy-duty vehicles, heavier trucks that will also be part of that electrification, we'll see technologies advance that will benefit consumers. And finally, it's about creating new jobs as well. With our critical mineral strategy here in Canada, we'll be supporting the development of EV supply chains in Canada, which will create more jobs, will create a growing economy, and again, allow people to be able to afford electric vehicles even quicker. So it's a comprehensive approach that is about going to where we know Canadians want to be in the coming years.
Prochaine question.
Catherine Marlowe, CBC News. A question on behalf of my Ottawa colleagues. Your budget says you intend to save time and be more efficient with the asylum seekers process by making everyone go online to submit their applications. But refugee advocates and immigration lawyers say your existing online portal is full of glitches, often delays applications by months, and it is impossible to fill out for refugee claimants who may have trouble accessing or using technology. Why are you shutting them out of the process by getting rid of the paper route?
On the contrary, what we've seen over the past number of years is there is a need to be able to process quicker and more people. We have some of the most ambitious targets for welcoming in immigrants to this country that we've ever had, with over 400,000 as our target this year. On top of that, we're bringing in record numbers of refugees from Afghanistan. We're responding to the incredible pressures in Ukraine as we continue to be a place of refuge for people fleeing violence from around the world. So there are massive pressures on our immigration system. We know that improving the digital portals will be a way of getting more people through quickly, but it is not meant to be a barrier to prevent people from accessing it. It's actually it's a way of enhancing the abilities and the pathways for people to be able to get through that process quickly and be able to come to Canada faster. Nous savons que nous sommes dans une situation où on a besoin de plus en plus d'immigrants et réfugiés pour bâtir notre pays, pour renforcer nos communautés, mais aussi pour répondre aux situations de conflit à travers le monde. Nous avons un plan extrêmement ambitieux pour plus de 400 000 immigrants qui arriveraient au Canada cette année. Mais en plus, on a augmenté nos niveaux de réfugiés, que ce soit d'Afghanistan, que ce soit de l'Ukraine ou que ce soit d'ailleurs dans le monde où on voit encore trop de conflits. Donc, de créer des systèmes plus informatisés pour pouvoir avoir des processus plus rapides, plus faciles, tout en continuant d'être là pour desservir les gens qui ont besoin de plus d'aide ou d'aide en personne, va nous permettre d'atteindre nos cibles ambitieuses et créer un Canada plus fort.
We'll take the last two questions.
Hi, Prime Minister Dirk Meisner from the Canadian Press here in Victoria. A lot of my friends have electric vehicles, and one of their major concerns are there is not enough of the quick charging stations around. So how can people be convinced that there's going to be more quick charging stations built?
We know that over the past years, there have been a number of Canadians who stepped forward and made the switch to electric vehicles, but continue to face challenges around quick charging station accessibility. We're seeing thousands of them being constructed across the country, and this investment in this budget is going to allow for thousands more. We know that is a key path forward on helping families make that final decision that it's time to switch to electric. And what we're seeing is more and more families are able to make that choice. We're making them more affordable by direct incentives to families. We're making them more accessible by increasing the number of charging stations. We're making sure that the industry is offering enough electric vehicles to people by mandating targets, and we're also continuing to demonstrate global leadership in the production and creation of electric vehicles, including with a focus on critical minerals. So there's lots of things we're doing. We're seeing the demands for new electric vehicles skyrocket across the country. Everyone wants to be part of it, and this government will make sure that people are accessing it.